All right, welcome back, guys. Let's go on to chapter 4. If you have ever lived through a disaster, or a tornado perhaps, or a hurricane, or a fiery plunging meteorite, then you'll know how Eddie felt as the squisher walked away. He stumbled to the wall and slumped against it. His legs shook so badly that gazing down, he could actually see his own fear rippling through them. The word home echoed in his head. Should he go back? The squishers were busy in their separate rooms now. If he walked quickly, he could return to the classroom before the next bell. He could hide behind the door till everyone left. Yes, that was what he should do. Home was safe. It was cozy and warm and smelled pleasingly buggy. Looking down, he saw his feet were already moving in that direction. Should he listen to his feet? Go home, they seemed to say. What are you thinking, rushing off like this? You don't know how to rescue anyone. He was standing there, wavering, when a new thought struck. So sad and so scary, it made his whole body ache. Aunt Min. What if she never came back? She was his teacher, his first, best, and only. If it weren't for Min, Eddie would know nothing of life, nothing except a small, crowded crack in the wall. It was Aunt Min who had told Eddie stories about the great worlds beyond, amazing, mysterious places. One of them you had to fly to. It was called Neverland. Another, at the end of a yellow brick road, was known as Oz. There was a magical school, too, called Hogwarts. And if you happened to fall down a rabbit hole, you might end up in a place called Wonderland, where if you ate magic cake, you would grow huge. How Eddie would have loved to find that cake. For a moment, he let himself dream. He came to with a start. And in that instant, looking around the hallway at its towering height, its endless length, its echoing depth, he had a flash of understanding. He, Eddie, was in a great world beyond. He, too, was on a journey. Like Peter and Dorothy and Harry and Alice in the stories, he was traveling to a mysterious, magical place. He couldn't turn back. Did Dorothy turn back? Peter? Harry? Alice? Never. Nor would Eddie. However small, green, and useless he was, he had to try. Follow the yellow brick road, he said out loud, remembering Dorothy. Eddie's road wasn't made of bricks, of course, but the wooden floorboards were yellow. It wasn't hard to pretend. Follow the yellow brick road, he said, even louder, and with the sound of his own voice and a road like that to follow, Eddie and his feet felt just a bit braver. The scariest part was the doorways. Each time he came to one, he peered inside, hoping to see the library. Each time, he found a classroom instead. The doorways were wide. They forced Eddie to leave the safety of the wall and step onto the open. Nowhere to hide. Each time he reached a doorway, he had to force himself across. There was only one way. Run. Just hope with all his heart it would be okay. And run, no stopping. Run. 3 great gaping doorways in all. He crossed them at lightning speed. A 4th door was smaller and closed. Eddie could see black letters on it. Excited, he gazed up. Boys, read Eddie. He read it again, surprised. It was like a door in a storybook, he thought. You open a door that says treasure, and inside you find treasure. Heaps of it. You open a door that says boys, and inside... He was so enjoying this thought that he stopped paying attention. Suddenly, his antennae buzzed wildly. He was turned. Legs! Long, bendy, and possibly thin, creeping along the baseboard. He looked up and almost fainted. That thing had way too many eyes. And in the second that he realized what that thing was, a spider. He also realized what he must look like through those eyes. Food! Eddie fled. Back he raced to his parents, to the classroom. away from the spider, bearing down now at shocking rate. He ran for his life, even knowing it was hopeless. The spider was bigger. It was stronger. It had 2 extra legs. At that moment, a door opened. Eddie turned. It was the door that said, "Boys." And there in the hallway, just like in a storybook, was a boy. "Hey," said the boy, bending down. "Spider, cool." The spider stopped faster than Eddie would have believed possible. It turned and ran in the opposite direction. "Don't go," said the boy. "I won't hurt you." Eddie watched as the boy followed the spider down the hall. The boy looked interested, that's all. He hunched over as he walked, watching the spider and showing no inclination to squish. Eddie waited until they disappeared. Then, with a last little shudder, he moved on. Soon, he came across a door that said, "Girls." He stared at it for a while, thinking about the girls behind the door. As he walked away, he let himself hope that there would be a third door that said "Bugs." But of course, there wasn't. "Follow the yellow brick road," he told himself again, trotting ever more quickly along the floorboards. He could feel a tingle in the air now. The library was starting to become real. It was just ahead, he was sure. He could smell it more clearly with every step. And when he finally arrived, he knew it was an instant. Gazing into the room, he felt a jolt of recognition, even though he'd never been there before. Maybe it was the gentle hush in the air, or the glorious, fusty smell of hundreds of books in one place. The paper, the ink, the stories. Oh, the stories. He stood there, breathing it in. He had smelled books before, of course, but never so many at once. The library was just as he dreamed, just as Aunt Min had described. The shelves rose like friendly castle walls, each with its rows of treasures. There was the story time carpet, spread softly in welcome, waiting for young squishers to gather. Over there was the comfy couch, offering its own invitation. Sit down, curl up, enjoy. And there in the corner was a large rocking chair, brightly painted in many different colors. Eddie knew it immediately. It was the storytime chair where the librarian read aloud in her rich, lifting voice. Eddie had never heard that voice, of course, but he knew it all about it. Aunt Min said it was as sweet as a chocolate chip. And just as Eddie was having that thought, he heard it, the librarian's voice. It was coming from the bookshelves. "Are you looking for information on wolves, Jasper?" "That will be in nonfiction. Let's look together." Eddie's antennae quivered. Bliss! If the librarian sounded this wonderful just talking, how must she sound reading a story? He could have listened to her all day. He could have stood in that doorway all day, too, if it weren't so dangerous. Sunshine poured through the skylight in the library ceiling, flooding the whole entrance with light. Eddie glanced up. Dappled treetops, plump white clouds. Men loved that skylight. He crept forward, checking for danger. The cream-colored linoleum on the library floor was pleasant to walk on, but it made him stand out like a freshly picked pea. Also, there were young squishers everywhere. The librarian had just spoken to one, and Eddie could hear others roaming about. Where was Aunt Min? On the left side of the doorway, he could see the librarian's huge oak desk. Aunt Min had mentioned that desk. She said it was a treasure that had been there since the school was first built. Eddie paused to admire its rich golden wood. It stood away from the wall with a chair behind it where the librarian could sit to greet children. Beyond the desk was a counter and then round tables with chairs. Along the wall was a row of desks, each with its own computer. There was also a large white screen. On the right side of the library was the storytime area, and beyond it, the rows of bookshelves. Huge windows looked out in the Ferny Creek woods where Eddie had been born. And far away at the end of the library stood a tall, thin wooden cabinet, painted red with bright decorative trim, blue, green, yellow. Eddie couldn't see it clearly, but he knew it well. It was Min's favorite bookshelf in the whole library. Might she be there? It was worth a try. He turned left, planning to creep along the wall on that side. He knew from Aunt Min that the librarian was different from most squishers. She was friendly to ants and flies and moths, and even shooed mosquitoes out the window. But the young squishers? Unpredictable. You just never knew what a young squisher would do. Eddie's antennae trembled as he crept forward. The wall took Eddie behind the librarian's desk, and behind the back of her chair, a cushy-looking green chair with tiny round wheels on the bottom. Eddie had never seen a chair with wheels before. He wondered if the librarian went riding on it. A picture came into his head of the librarian riding her chair down the hallway at night. "Whee!" she shouted. The thought made him laugh, a sharp bark of mirth. He choked back the sound immediately. Had the squishers heard? No, it didn't seem so. He started to move on. But wait, what was that? Something strange, yet familiar. A sound so small and faint, he strained his whole body to listen. "Eddie," he heard. Imagined? "Eddie." He looked around. "Hello?" he said. "Up here, Eddie. Look up." Come back for chapter 5.